So if you have Ruth's book and you've read it, you'll recognize this table. This is from chapter 7, which is the chapter that is on FAR transfer training, or what she calls principle-based learning. And this chart refers to both content and performance as a matrix. So I wanted to spend a little time describing this, especially for people who are less familiar with Ruth's work. So we're kind of jumping into this at the end. So in the book, Developing Technical Training, Ruth presents several different content types, and you can see that along your x-axis there. They are facts, concepts, procedures, and principles. And the two pieces that we're going to be contrasting today are the two different task types, and those are what you see at the far end of the matrix. So procedures are one type of tasks, and principles are another type of task. And so when we're talking about principles, we're talking about far transfer training tasks. And when we're talking about procedures, we're talking about near transfer training tasks. And the reason that she uses those terms is to make a distinction between the way that we train different types of tasks. So procedures are those tasks that are very much step by step. They're done the same way every single time. The point is to produce a consistent result. And so that's why they're called near transfer tasks. The way that you train them is pretty much the way that they're performed on the job. And in contrast, principles are not like that. They are the tasks that there isn't just one way to do them. There isn't just one right answer. The way that you navigate a principle-based task is going to be determined by the circumstances, the different variables that are available in the environment, right? So the way that you approach training a FAR transfer task is very different from how you train a procedural task. And that's where people get into trouble. And that'll be a key point that we highlight throughout this presentation. That refers to the task, but what about these other three content types that we see here, facts, concepts, and process? That refers to the background information that you may need to introduce in order for people to understand how to do the procedure or how to do the principle-based task. And so from Ruth's perspective, she gives you very specific instructions on how to design facts, concepts, and processes relative to how you need to sequence them in order to learn these two tasks. So again, we're jumping in at chapter 7. She refers to how you design these other content types in earlier chapters in her book. So this is a very valuable book for that reason specifically. So if you've never really thought about, oh, there's a way you design a concept, there's a way you design a process, absolutely. So I wanted to make sure that that was clear, that we are jumping in kind of towards the end. So if this seems a little challenging, it's because, yeah, when you read a book and you jump towards the end of the chapter, it's generally helpful to know what came before it in order to be able to understand where you're at. So I wanted to ground that for you. The other thing that you'll notice with this particular matrix is by looking at the y-axis, you'll see the words apply and remember. And what that refers to is the learning objectives that you're creating around your training. So a lot of people like to talk about Bloom's taxonomy, and that's one way of looking at objectives. But learning objectives can typically be written a couple of different ways. They can be written at the level of what Ruth would call the remember or the recall level, which is basically just reiterating or regurgitating information, versus the application or apply level. And myself, Ruth, and others would almost always advocate for writing your learning objectives at the apply level. And the reason for that is because the goal of, especially on the job training, is not to just regurgitate information or recall information. It's about to be able to actually apply what you've learned on the job under the appropriate circumstances to be able to perform according to expectation. So there's a difference in the way that you write a learning objective based on whether it's written just for you to recall something or to apply something. And so you can see the examples here. So contrasting the remember the definition, remember level of objective for concepts versus classifying new examples, where you're actually having to do something with those examples instead of just recall the information. And this becomes really, really important as we get into the actual work of what we're doing. And so you might see the words remember, 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 but remember can also be using other words like listing or recalling or anything that is just essentially reflecting back the information without doing anything to it. And again, while that might be useful that you need to remember in order to apply, it's really about the application. So the main thing to take away here is the difference between what's a procedure and what's a principle.